here in Oregon, Fred Meyer, the workers there are on strike here in the Portland area. Um,
All right, for the East Coast, let me pop in here. Fred Meyer on the West Coast, big, huge supermarket chain that we do not have on the East Coast
right.
here, but it it already on its own is one of the biggest ones on the West Coast.
Yeah, it's huge. And then
Right.
they also sell like clothes and hardware and stuff like that. Fred Meyer's also has now gasoline and whatnot that they sell too, so they have gas stations. So Fred Meyer used to be kind of a local chain here in the West Coast. It started in Portland. Um, it was kind of geared towards they wanted to have like really good customer service. They wanted to be like sort of the Nordstroms of grocery shopping kind of thing. That's kind of
To a degree, they've succeeded
they did.
with that to a certain degree. They have.
Yeah, in the past they did. Then Kroger bought them out, like 15, 20 years ago, something like that. And Kroger, I'm sure you guys on the East Coast know too, Kroger is probably the biggest grocery chain in America. They also own QVC, they own Hagen, and a bunch of others. Well, uh, Kroger changed it. It's changed quite a bit. It's not really about the customer service stuff anymore. But recently, the workers at the Fred Meyer through the local union, because Fred Meyer's always had a union, um, decided to go on strike. And it's kind of an interesting story because jumping into it, Fred Meyer workers go on strike in Portland, Oregon. So the union in the greater Portland area began a strike over unfair practices against the grocery chain Wednesday morning. The strike, which could last through Labor Day weekend, impacts 28 stores. Unionized workers authorized the strike in a vote earlier this month. It was an overwhelming vote to multiple allegations of unfair labor practices committed by the grocer, according to the United Food and Commercial Workers. The local union said about 4,500 Fred Meyer workers are impacted. The strike unfolds against the backdrop of a federal court hearing about the Federal Trade Commission's efforts to block Kroger's planned merger with Albertsons. This is what it really is about, which started Monday, as well as separate contract negotiations between UFCW, Local 555, and Albertsons. Okay, so just the strike follows numerous bargaining attempts, which began in late July between the local union and Kroger, Fred Meyer, and QVC. So that's all one company under Kroger. A union member wrote 2 weeks ago, overwhelmingly approved the strike. The UOP strike is crucial to force Fred Meyer to comply with their obligations as an employer to their employees. Our members are united in demanding fair treatment, which can only be reached if Fred Meyer actually stands behind its public statements and is willing to fulfill all their obligations and legal requirements. So, and then this is just the guy, the president of Fred Meyer, saying, "Oh, they have a right to strike and blah blah blah," but I don't care. Um, let's see. The union said Fred Meyer proposal during the bargaining meeting on April 19th included wage increases and a one-time bonus for workers, but claimed the grocer would negatively impact the employees' health care plan. So what they offered is this. It's not in this story, but they offered. Fred Meyer said, "Okay, we'll offer $3.50 an hour increase in wages over the next 3 years, but as part of that, we're going to reduce your health care so we can save costs on that. So we're not really paying you that much more because we're reducing what our out of pocket is for health care." So it was kind of a one hand to the other kind of thing, right? Six in one hand, half a dozen in another kind of bullshit. They had to do something in good faith. Part of that is because the pressure is coming because of this merger with Albertsons. If they merge with Albertsons, they will basically have a monopoly on the West Coast for groceries, which means they'll be able to get to set a lot of prices, and they'll get to set what the standard wages are for grocery workers. Right? So the union initially was like, "Look, we're okay with this, but we need to get some long-term contract that guarantees cost of living increase and all that shit." Fred Meyer dragged their feet. Well, not Fred Meyer, Kroger dragged their feet, right? But here's the thing. So this is the deal with the Albertsons merger. So inside the legal battle over Kroger and Albertsons and the fate of the biggest supermarket merger in history. This is gigantic, okay? So Kroger and Albertsons are facing off against the FTC, the Federal Trade Commission, in court over the proposed $24.6 billion merger. The FTC argues the merger would reduce competition and raise grocery prices. Fucking would. The fate of the biggest supermarket merger in U.S. history could come down to a federal judge's decision. Okay, so the fate of the largest supermarket merger in U.S. history hangs in the balance as an ongoing 3-week hearing unfolds inside an Oregon federal courtroom. Supermarket giants Kroger and Albertsons are duking it out in court against regulators who are trying to block the company's proposed $24.6 billion merger over antitrust concerns. For those of you who don't know, antitrust is basically the laws we put into place to stop companies from forming monopolies. So to make sure capitalism works, right?
And it protects us. So if we want to distill it down to what it literally means for you and me every day,
Right.
is it protects us against things like, in this case, them getting to set the wages for workers in that industry and the prices for us.
Right.
When we're going to the supermarket. People have already been complaining. You know, we talk so much, people say this, that, inflation, whatever. Like, okay, this would be a big deal because they would get to set the prices, they would get to jack the prices, and there would be a limited number of places you could go to do any better.
Right. Well, just to give you guys a concept, and we'll get into this a little bit more too later in a minute, but so Kroger, during the pandemic, after the post-pandemic, when they jacked up the price gouged, Kroger made a ton of money. Their CEO, his pay increased by 18.5% over 2 years. So almost a 20% pay increase in 2 years. Raise your hand if you've gotten that, ever. No, it doesn't happen.
I can think of exactly 0 times I've gotten an increase like that in that short a span of time.
And I'm not talking about getting a new, better job or higher paying job. I'm talking about for the same job that you've been doing. It doesn't happen. But it does happen at the executive level. Executives at Fred Meyer and at Kroger, though, also saw their wages increase by over 10% in the last 2 years. But employees haven't seen shit. And furthermore,
the employees haven't seen anything, and the customers that are coming in are paying more.
Right.
So we're paying more, and the employee standing in front of us is not doing better either.
Right.
It screws everybody except the very few people at the very top.
Well, and furthermore, the only reason they're paying lower, we'll get to that, the only reason they're employees there is because the union requires them to have X number of employees there. Otherwise, Kroger wouldn't do that. They do what Walmart does. They'd skeleton crew staff it, pay those people poverty wages, and that would be it. But the problem is if you have a monopoly, it's not just that they can set the wages and the prices. It's a domino effect, because what happens if they screw up or they just understaff or don't do the basics to get food on the shelves, right? Well, then there's a higher demand for food because they fucked up the supply, and there's nobody else doing it. There's no competition to drive them to actually do it, right? So now the prices have gone up. There's scarcity. What's the incentive for them to actually supply their customer when you have to go to them, right? So this is scary in the sense of, do you really want to live in a place where one company has control over whether or not you can get food and toilet paper? I mean, this is like the things you're trying to avoid in capitalism because it's not capitalistic. It's oligarchical, right? So the change.
It essentially eliminates competition. It doesn't create competition, which should be better for the consumer. It eliminates it,
right,
which is dangerous on the consumer end.
Right. So their argument here in the court, which I don't think is going to float, but we'll see. The chains argue that Kroger's acquisition of Albertsons would boost competition with behemoth retail rivals like Walmart, Costco, and Amazon, while regulators from the Federal Trade Commission allege the opposite, saying the deal is actually anti-competitive and would result in higher grocery prices for millions of Americans as well as lower wages for workers. Exactly what we were just talking about, because they'd have basically a monopoly. Both sides are making their case before the U.S. District Judge Adrienne Nelson, who will ultimately decide at the end of the hearing next month whether to approve FTC's request for a preliminary injunction against the merger. So it doesn't necessarily stop the merger, but it'll put an injunction to prevent it from going forward. Already this week, Kroger executives' internal email about price hikes for eggs and milk beyond the added cost from inflation has drawn scrutiny in the courtroom. So they were already talking about how could we jack up the price. Just this week, even more. How much could we price gouge more? And this is after Kroger executives have already seen a huge pay increase from doing that. So they want to keep doing it, right? And the shareholders love it because they're making a ton of money. This cherry-picked email covers a specific period and does not reflect Kroger's decades-long business model to lower prices for customers by reducing its margins. The Kroger spokesman told Business Insider in the statement. What's missing is the fact that Kroger's retail prices include the cost to run a grocery store, including labor, transportation, advertising, and other costs. Many of these costs have significantly increased since 2020. Kroger's pricing decisions are impacted by factors beyond inflation. I haven't had a chance to go through their balance and income statements, but we'll do that at some point here. If the judge overseeing the hearing ultimately rules in favor of the FTC, the deal between Kroger and Albertsons could end up torpedoed completely. Well, that'd be great. A temporary injunction would put the merger on ice as the FTC holds a separate in-house proceeding of the deal before an administrative law judge. So that's what's going on there. Why is the union strike happening? Because if this doesn't happen and they do get the merger and the union doesn't have a contract prior to the merger, they're not going to get a contract, a favorable contract. Because why would they? Where else are your employees going to go?
Right.
There's nowhere else to go. Oh, they could go to QVC, also owned by Kroger. They could go to Hagen, also owned by Kroger. Where are they going to go? Safeway?
You know, and there's a few of them remaining. Safeway, there's Whole Foods, some other smaller chains out on the West Coast, New Seasons, but they can't absorb all those employees.
No, they can't. So here, I just wanted to show you this. So I got this from ZipRecruiter. I just wanted to get a sense of what the pay was like for these jobs. I mean, I did retail grocery to get through college, but that was years ago. So just to get a sense of this, so right now, supermarket salary, this is ZipRecruiter. This is their estimate from what's reported. So part of the strike, too, is this, just a side note this. Fred Meyer got sued in 2022 for not paying employees. They said it was an error in their payroll system. They've had multiple suits since then that they've settled. One was for like $2.5 million. But like employees just not getting paid what they're owed. Right? And then they've had other complaints and they're not releasing their data on the employee complaints that are still pending that they haven't looked into really. And two, a lot of their pay scale data. So it's hard to tell what they're paying. Because they're supposed to release that information to the union. And it's supposed to be public for the union so the union can negotiate. Without being blind, right? But they're not doing that right now. They're withholding that information probably because it's not good. And it doesn't help them. They want to wait till after the merger. So supermarket salary and this is general supermarkets right now. They're estimating about $24 an hour because it factors in on the average. But median was going to be around 20 to 23. So probably 22, 21, 22. Would probably be closer to the median. The average is 24 because you got to factor in people that are making up to 46. Now, just to give you a sense, 46 is $92,000 a year, and that's 1% of the jobs, less than 1%.
So that's probably management and
high
not even store level management, like the regional, like upper level management, not like a store manager.
Well, some store managers are probably making close to 100, I bet, or a little over. But yeah, that's kind of rarity. $24 an hour is $48,000 a year. U.S. median is 55, so even the average is below the U.S. median income. So grocery store workers make less than median income. And that's if we're assuming the average, and that's not that much less. Well, I was like, okay, how does Fred Meyer compare? Once again, there's not a lot of data, so I went to Indeed because they took sort of the general data from the stores. And so bakery clerk is about $16.23. So these are just people reporting their salaries. So it might be a little higher or a little lower than this. It's kind of hard to tell. It's not going to be that much higher or lower. But
got to be close.
Yeah, it's got to be within like $1 or $2. Grocery associate is making about $18.66. So if we figure that and the average is 23, 24, they're $450, $550 off the mark. So they're between probably $7,000 and $11,000 a year off the average, but beneath the average.
And that's a huge difference.
That's gigantic.
That's a huge difference.
That's like almost $1,000 a month. $500 to $1,000 a month. That's groceries.
Right, you change my salary
Ironically.
by $1,000 a month in either direction, and it makes a huge difference.
Oh,
So being off by that amount is
A lot.
astronomical.
So this $3.50 an hour raise we're promising over the next 3 years doesn't even get us to average. And we're going to reduce your health benefits in the process. So it's kind of a bullshit offer. They made an offer because I think they felt like they had to, so they wouldn't look like total dicks, right? But they made an offer that they knew they weren't going to take. Because they're still, for them, they're waiting. We just got to stall this out till the end of the month and hopefully win this hearing. And if we win this hearing, then we're merging with Albertsons and we held all the cards. And the union can't really do much. And part of what's revealing is when we go back to that article about the merger, as their argument was, it's not fair because we want to compete with companies like Walmart and Amazon. Walmart, Costco, and Amazon. Costco not so much, but Walmart and Amazon. Companies that are notorious for underpaying and abusing their workers.
Right.
But we want to compete with them. So to do that, you're saying we got to become like them. Which is kind of what they're trying to do here.
Right. They're not trying to raise the standard.
No.
They're trying to lower themselves
Under the bar.
Yeah, below the bar. Yes,
Yeah.
they're. How low can you go? They're playing limbo with people's lives.
But that's what's sort of going on. My guess is right now that's what they're doing, is they're just trying to stall out until, and hopefully win this hearing, and then they'll negotiate and they'll offer some piddly nothing to the union. Because the union won't really have anywhere to go. Who else are they going to bargain and negotiate with? But we'll try to get somebody from the union to come on and talk to us, because that would be interesting to see what we can find out. And we'll contact Fred Meyer and see what's going on with them. They probably won't answer us though. Historically, businesses don't like to answer us. So.
That's true.
So anyway, but yeah, we'll keep you posted on that going forward. But I thought that was an interesting story because it gives you a good sense of how capitalism is kind of screwed up. Because we create this scenario where, yeah, Amazon and Walmart now have monopolies. They underpay their employees. Walmart's notorious for paying poverty wages. And the first thing you learn in training at Amazon, or not Amazon, Walmart, is how to apply for food stamps. Because you're immediately going to qualify because they don't pay you enough. So, in fact,
wow,
your tax dollars are paying for a lot of Amazon's workers. You're subsidizing their employees. And I'll bet you Kroger...
Wait, are you talking about Amazon or Walmart? Because you said Walmart first and then you said Amazon.
Walmart.
Okay.
Amazon pays above that, but Amazon's got other issues where they just overwork their employees and they're abusive to their employees. They have their employees on schedules. So, like, you can't even take a bathroom break. So people are, like, peeing in bottles or wetting themselves on the floor because they have to meet certain quotas. I mean, it's ridiculous at Amazon. And so Kroger's basically saying, we need to be like that if we want to compete. And they're not entirely wrong. But the problem is then, yeah, the workers all get fucked. So really it comes down to, does the government step up and do something? Which is, we'll get into a little bit of that later. So this election's going to make a big difference. On if you're a working class person, you work for your money like we do. It's going to make a big difference, whether or not it's Donald Trump or Kamala Harris, or if it's going to be a Republican Senate or a Democratic Senate. It's going to make a big difference on your wallet and your ability to survive. So it's important to pay attention. So we'll...